Hello, everyone, and welcome to the knowledge development session for today. And on the KD session today, we'll be looking at a very interesting aspect of the software development field, a concept that is very popular and that software developers use in developing web development, in making web applications, And this is the MVC framework or architecture. And then we want to look at how it is used in web development processes and how it is used to develop web applications. So we'll be looking at the overview, what makes up the MVC architecture, that is the component. We'll look at popular frameworks that employ this architecture, and then we'll look at some of the advantages of employing the MVC architecture with regards to web development. All right, so MVC is an acronym for Model, View, and Controller. And this is a software design pattern that is commonly used for developing user interfaces. And this helps to divide the logic that are related to any program into three but interconnected components. And those components are the model, the view, and the controller. And each of these components, each aspect of the component, the model, the view, and the controller have specific responsibility. So they serve as unique aspect of the entire project or of the entire web application, and then they serve specific purposes in that particular project. And because we can actually divide various aspects of a web application into the MVC pattern, it helps in building extensible project, also projects that can be scalable. We can add more and more codes to the project as depending on the upgrade to the application, and it's going to allow for it because everything is divided into unique aspects, into unique components that play unique roles, and they all work together for the overall functionality of the web application. And MVC is one of the first approaches to describe and implement software construct in terms of their responsibility. We have various components that have unique responsibility in an application. So let's look at the components. So we have three components, like I said earlier. We have the model, the view, and the controller. So we're going to look at them up close, one after the other. So the model component corresponds to all the data related logic that a user will work with. So it can represent either the data that is being transferred between the view, that is from the user, and the controller, or any other business related logic. And basically, the model interacts with the database, and what we have in the database is the data, whether the one that has been given by the user from the view, which is going to talk about. For instance, you have a contact form, you fill in some information like your name, your telephone number, your email, and you save that. So that is going to be stored in the database. And what actually interacts with those particular data that has been stored in the database is the model. So the model interacts with that specifically. And then next is the view. So the view component is used for all the user interface logic of the application. So everything we see from the application, when you log into a website, for instance, when you log into a website, everything you see represents the view, right? The contact form, the header, the paragraphs, the input form, all of those things are in the view. So the view represents every single thing that the user is going to interact with in terms of the application. And then you have the controller. So the controller basically serves as an interface between the model and the view. So it acts as the brain between both of them. All right. So for instance, when you visit a website, for instance, you input some things using the view. All right. And then the controller is then going to take all the data that has been imputed, every single thing that the user have done on the view section, because that's the only thing the user can interact with. All right, it's going to now take all of those data and then transfer it to show the model that interacts with the database, basically. So you input your form, the input form is the view, then you have your database, then the controller is going to store those, collect those data, store them, and then transfer them into the database, basically. And let's look at it. Let's have an overlook. So this is basically what the MVC framework looks like. All right. So you have the view, you have the controller, and then you have the model. So you see a user interacting with the view at 1. And then the view is going to alert the controller of a particular event, because the controller is where most of the query, the logic are written. This is where majority of the code are written, right? And then once the controller is alerted by the view, the controller then updates the model accordingly, either by storing information there that has been entered by the user through the view. And then that is going to be updated in the model that interacts with the database. So the model is the one that is the representation of the database, all the data that has been that can be stored. For instance, the name, the username, the phone number, everything is represented by the model, right? And then the from the view, once the user interacts with the view and enter and save some data, the controller is going to take those data and then update them into the model that is the database. And then the model then alerts the view that, well, some changes have been made, and it can be returned to the person, maybe by saying, thank you for registering, we're going to get back to you, or by logging in and then you get something like, hello, Senator, welcome to your page, something like that. So when you log in, the controller alerts the model that someone is logging in, and then update that accordingly, and then returns the information back to the view. And sometimes the view can actually interact with data directly by updating and by viewing some of the data sometimes too. And that also works. But this architecture just makes writing code very neat, because the view is only solely going to represent the user interfaces, the form, the HTML, the CSS and all. But the controller and the model, then the controller basically the logic, the query, for instance, and then the model have a representation of the data basically and interact with the database. All right, so see, these are some of the benefits of using the MVC architecture. One, it organizes large size web application. So for instance, you don't need to scroll down thousands of lines of code to maybe debug something, depending on where the issue is coming. If, for instance, you are not getting data from the database, maybe your application is not returning data, you know where to go to. The issue is most likely going to be in the model or the controller, right? And then you can easily store that. And if it's with the user interface, you know you're going to the view. So that way we can organize large size web application into various sections, whether the view, the model, and the controller, and then we can easily debug them or organize them essentially. Also, it is easily modifiable. And this is an interesting thing about the MVC. You can easily modify it because you know exactly where you want to go to and then modify that. It also increases the time of developing web application, faster development process. You can also have multiple views using the MVC framework. So the MVC framework supports multiple views. You can have as many views as possible, all right? And then it is also easy to plan and to maintain. Maintenance is very key here. You can easily maintain it, like I mentioned earlier, due to the fact that we have specific components and specific aspects of the MVC framework that handle specific tasks with regards to the web application. And then this is also an SEO, search engine optimization friendly platform. So up next, we look at popular frameworks that use that implement the MVC framework with regards to web application. So the one we have in Python, we have Django. So Django is the Python framework that employs the MVC architecture in web development. G2 is a PHP framework that also employs the MVC, the model, view, and the controller framework or design pattern in designing web application. Angular, JavaScript, and then Laravel for PHP. All of these have these frameworks actually employ and they use the MVC architecture in helping to build very neat, extensible, and scalable web application. Right. In conclusion, so MVC, I said earlier, is short for model, view, and controller, and is an architectural pattern that is used for efficiently relating the user interface to underlying data models and organizing them to relate to the application code. So MVC is primarily used to separate the application into three main components, which is model that interacts with the database, view that the user interacts with, and the controller that serves as the interface between the view and the controller. Thank you for listening.